jai, ISKCON New Govardhana ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, all glories to the devotees, all glories to the devotees, all glories to the devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, The Cause of All Causes, text number 25. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tamasad abhibhutere Vikaravanad habunnabaha Tasyama chagana sabdo Lingam yadristra drishyayo Tamasad abhibhutere Vikaravanadabunnabaha Tasyama chagana sabdo Lingam yadristra drishyayo Tamasad abhibhutere Vikaravanadabunnabaha Tasyama chagana sabdo Lingam yadristra drishyayo Tamasat, from the darkness of false ego, Api, certainly, Bhutade, of the material elements, Vikaravanat, because of transformation, Abhut, generated, Navaha, the sky, Tasha, its, Matra, subtle form, Gunaha, quality, Shabdaha, sound, Lingam, characteristics, Yat, as its, Dristra, the seer, Drishyayo, of what is seen. Translation Translation from the darkness of false ego, the first of the five elements, namely the sky, is generated. Its subtle form is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer is in relationship with the seen. Translation, please repeat. From the darkness of false ego, the first of the five elements, namely the sky, is generated. Its subtle form is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer is in relationship with the seen. Therefore, the five elements, namely sky, air, fire, water and earth, are all but different qualities of the darkness of false ego. This means that the false ego in the sum total form of Mahatattva is generated from the marginal potency of the Lord, and due to this false ego of lording it over the material creation, ingredients are generated for the false enjoyment of the living being. The living being is practically the dominating factor over the material elements as the enjoyer, though the background is the Supreme Lord. Factually, save and except the Lord, no one can be called the enjoyer, but the living entity falsely desires to become the enjoyer. This is the origin of false ego. When the bewildered living being desires this, the shadow elements are generated by the will of the Lord, and the living entities are allowed to run after them as after a phantasmagoria. It is said that the first of the Tanmatra sound is created and then the sky, and in this verse it is confirmed that actually it is so. But sound is the subtle form of the sky, and the distinction is like that between the seer and the seen. The sound is the representation of the actual object, as the sound produced speaking of the object gives an idea of the description of the object. Therefore, sound is the subtle characteristic of the object. Similarly, sound representation of the Lord in terms of his characteristics is the complete form of the Lord, as was seen by Vasudeva and Maharaj Dasarath, the fathers of Lord Krishna and Lord Ram. The sound representation of the Lord is non-different from the Lord himself, because the Lord and his representation in sound are absolute knowledge. Lord Chaitanya has instructed us that in the holy name of the Lord, as sound representation of the Lord, all the potencies of the Lord are invested. Thus, one can immediately enjoy the association of the Lord by the pure vibration of the sound representation of his holy name, and the concept of the Lord is immediately manifested before the pure devotee. A pure devotee, therefore, is not aloof from the Lord even for a moment. The holy name of the Lord, as recommended in Sastras, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, may therefore be constantly chanted by the devotee, aspiring to be constantly in touch with the Supreme Lord. One who is thus able to associate with the Lord is sure to be delivered from the darkness of the created world, which is a product of false ego. Tamasi ma jyotir gama. So we continue with this process of creation, how all the different elements came to be in the material world. So, of course, this is Lord Brahma speaking to Narad Muni. And for those who have been listening to these verses regularly, it's not easy to understand, as it's very technical in many ways. And Sukadeva Goswami, he does mention to Maharaj Parikshit that even you have a lifetime of Lord Brahma, still you won't understand how the whole universe is working, because it's very, very technical and intricate, and so many mystical things are going on. And even with the scientists, they present to us their speculative theories about how the earth and the universe, etc., come into being. Of course, their whole theories are very, very technical as well. But the difference is that they have ongoing research, and when they come up with something new, they try to add it into their theory, like, adjusting the theory. But we've found out this, so maybe the theory, we'll have to adjust our theory. So this is going on, finding more knowledge and adjusting it. But so this is known as the ascending method of attaining knowledge, that through trial and error we try to, through our research, we try to understand how things are going on, and we try to fit it into our theory. So the theory is constantly in flux, it's constantly changing. So Prabhupada would call this a post-dated check, that Prabhupada says, I want to know how is going on, and the scientists say, yes, in the future we can tell you. But we don't have to wait for the future. For those who have faith in Srimad Bhagavatam revealed literature, we can understand right now, because this knowledge doesn't change. What Lord Brahma is speaking to Narad Muni, and what all the sages throughout the different millennia are speaking, it hasn't changed. We're hearing exactly the same thing. Like what Krishna spoke to Arjuna on the battlefield, we can hear it from the Bhagavad Gita now. It hasn't changed. So we can have faith that, if we put our faith in what we're hearing now, it's not going to change in future. But the scientists are not promising that. They say in the future we can tell you. So in the end, it's up to where the individual wants to put their faith. But for those devotees who are trying to develop the faith of Srimad Bhagavatam, they can be assured that the knowledge is not going to be changing. So in this particular verse we're hearing, it's interesting that it starts off from the darkness of false ego. So I thought that was interesting, the darkness of false ego. So why is it darkness of false ego? Because it's born out of passion and ignorance. That false ego, it's not the true or pure ego of the self. It's the false ego which causes us to identify with this material body, thinking this body is ourselves, and that everything related to the body is there for me to enjoy. So therefore, we're hearing the darkness of false ego because it brings about ignorance. So that ignorance is, the analogy of darkness is related to lack of knowledge. So the darkness of false ego, the first of the 5 elements, namely the sky, is generated. So of the 5 elements, of course, we've got earth, water, fire, air and ether. Sometimes ether, sometimes sky, but basically it's the same thing. So the difference between air and sky, or air and ether, I've always wondered exactly what is the difference, how to explain it. We quite often rattle it off, earth, water, fire, air and ether, but don't always think what is the difference between air and ether. So just from my own information, I sort of delved into that a little bit. So from one room conversation, it was just very short, but Prabhupada, he's saying the sky, the presence of ether by sound. The student said, but how is ether distinct from air? And Prabhupada, very simple explanation, says you can either, ether you cannot touch, or you cannot feel touch, air you can feel touch. So that's a very simple explanation. Air you can feel, like when the wind's blowing, you can feel that air. Or when you're breathing in and out, you know that air is coming in and out. But ether you cannot feel. So from Bhagavatam 3:26-32, it's mentioned that from sound the ether became manifested and the air became manifested from ether. So there's a from one comes the other. The ethereal sky comes from sound, the air comes from sky, and fire comes from the air. So the next few verses we hear like how each element manifests. Of course, this one we're just hearing about ether. So in the beginning was sound, and we hear even in the Bible it mentions in the beginning was the Word. So referring to sound, and of course that sound travels through the air. Like I'm speaking and everybody is hearing with the receptacle of the ear. Sometimes you get, I've had people say, throwing esoteric questions, or what about the sound of one hand clapping? I think that's a Buddhist thing, I don't know, but what about that sound? I said, well, if there's one hand, how can you be clapping? There can't be any sound. Or what about, one person asked me, said, if a branch in the forest falls down and nobody's there to hear it, will it make a sound? And I said, well, no, it won't. I said, well, it will make a sound. And I immediately say, well, how do you know? You're not there. And so I responded, if somebody rings you but you're not home to hear it, will your phone make a sound? And they had no response to that. But of course, it's not the hearing, it's not the presence of the ear that makes the sound. It's just the sound, some sort of, contact, and that presents a vibration. And that vibration moves through the air. So, so with the sound, like Prabhupada mentions that. he gives the example that its subtle form is the quality of sound, ether, that the subtle form of ether is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer is in relationship with the seen. So when you are seeing something with your eyes, there's a relationship between your eyes and the object that you're seeing. Through the via medium of your eyes, you can understand what the object is. You know, you can see its size, you can see its colour, you might see its texture, you might understand, you know, what it's used for. So information is gained through the eyes. So similarly, through the via medium of sound, if somebody's describing to you an object that, well, it's like this and it's like that and it's this colour and etc., just by hearing that, you can understand what it is. So that's the understanding of this analogy, that the seer is in relationship with the seen, so it's also the sound vibration is in relationship with the object that's been described. And particularly Prabhupada mentioned in his purport that if you're hearing about Krishna, of course there's a difference between that sort of material understanding that you're hearing about an object and you're understanding what that object is, as compared to hearing about Krishna. It's not only you understand something about Krishna, but Krishna is personally present in that sound vibration. So he's talking about that because the Lord and his representation in sound are absolute knowledge. Lord Chaitanya has instructed us that in the holy name of the Lord, as sound representation of the Lord, all the potencies of the Lord are invested. So we were just chanting earlier, Shastika. So text 2, that Nam Nam Akari Bahura Nijashava Shakti Stachapata Nyamata Smarane Kala. So just part of that translation, in these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. So in in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada has given a purport of that particular verse, and he says, so the potency of the holy names is not restricted to just the literal recitation of the words. So it's not just that we like to sing or we like to chant and we're just, you know, like an ordinary song on a radio or something, we're just sort of singing along. It's not simply reciting some words, nor is it restricted to the comprehension that happens on hearing the words. So as I gave the example, somebody describes an object and you can understand from that description what they're describing. So it's not simply just understanding the description of something. So the potency is because Krishna chooses to invest his omnipotence in the holy name. So tatra apata niyamata. So apata means he has offered it to the jivas. This is Prabhupada. He's saying that apata means he has offered it to the jivas. He has invested his omnipotence in the sound of the holy names for the soul to take benefit. So Prabhupada used the example that if you're chanting, you know, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, well, you won't get the taste of Coca-Cola and neither will your thirst be satisfied. It's simply a material sound vibration. But when we're chanting Krishna's name, Krishna is personally present in that sound vibration. So that's the difference. Krishna has chosen to invest his omnipotence, his whole being, his whole energy in his name. And so when we're chanting that, we can get direct association, you know, direct benefit from being in direct contact with Krishna himself. So of course that classic analogy of putting metal into fire, that metal takes on the qualities of the fire, heat and light, through the association of the fire. So similarly, if we're associating with Krishna through the via medium of the holy name, because he himself has entered into his name, his whole omnipotence, his whole potency is there, we can take on Krishna's, the benefit of Krishna's direct association. So it's an interesting point to remember that sometimes we may become a little bit complacent with our japa, with our chanting, and we're just sort of rattling it off to get the 16 rounds or whatever number we're chanting out the way, and then get on with our day. But we should be thinking that this is our special time, that we're just with ourselves and Krishna. We're just connecting with Krishna directly through by medium of his name. And I know Mahatma Prabhu, sometimes in his japa workshops, he says you shouldn't talk about my japa, you should be talking about our japa, as in myself and Krishna together. We're relishing or trying to develop relishing the taste of Krishna's holy name. And this way, Krishna is assisting us in purifying our heart of all our, our anarthas, unwanted things within the heart, and slowly developing pure love of Krishna. So Krishna, he's eager to help us. And as soon as we start chanting his name, he's directly there, and he's trying to inspire us in so many different ways. So in the beginning, it may seem like some sort of mechanical process that I'm just chanting his name. The mind's filled with so many other things, but somehow or other we're trying to chant Krishna's name. But Krishna is not a machine. His name is not mechanical. Krishna's a person, and he's personally present in his name. So by hearing his name with full attention, we are directly receiving Krishna's full omnipotence, full energy there. So we have the example of like Rukmini, who was one of the primary queen of Krishna in Dwarka. So she was just a very young girl, about 14 years old, and her father was going to marry her to is it Shishupal? Shishupal. And of course Rukmini, because Shishupal was, he was basically a demoniac mentality, had no respect or interest in Krishna being the supreme person. And of course that was being arranged by her brother Rukmi, who was friends with Shishupal. But of course Rukmini, basically she was a goddess of fortune. So she could only be married basically to Krishna. But so she wasn't very happy that this arrangement was being made to Shishupal. So she wrote a letter and gave it to a trusted brahmana to take to Krishna, that this is the situation, and I have developed so much love for you. So it was interesting that even though she had never met Krishna, she'd only heard descriptions of him when the different sadhus and sages, devotees would come to her father's court, and she was there listening to the descriptions of Krishna. And just by hearing that sound vibration of Krishna entering into her ear, her latent attraction for Krishna developed so much, and she could only think that he's the only person I can marry. So it's another instance of Krishna has invested his omnipotence into his name. Also, descriptions of Krishna's qualities is exactly the same. Just by hearing about Krishna's qualities is the same with chanting about Krishna. And it's interesting that Prabhupada even extends that more. There was a situation when Jayananda Prabhu was building the Rath Yatra carts in might have been San Francisco. So he was working very, very hard. And one time Prabhupada visited the temple and he was giving class, and Jayananda, he was, out the back, banging, bang, bang away, trying to get the Rath cart, meet the deadline. And one of the devotees thought that this was a disturbance. And he told Prabhupada, I'll tell him to stop banging during class. And Prabhupada said, no, this banging, this is also Srimad Bhagavatam. because you're building the Rath Yatra cart, it's for the Lord's pleasure, for Jagannath's pleasure. So Prabhupada saw that. This is also Srimad Bhagavatam, constructing the cart like that. So anything to do with Krishna is absolute, non-different from Krishna himself. So Rukmini was hearing the descriptions of Krishna, even though she'd never met him, at least in that life. She had given her whole heart to Krishna. So she sent a letter, gave a letter to the Brahmana and told Krishna that this is a situation, I'm going to be married to Shishupal, but I want you to come and kidnap me and take me as your wife. So that was basically the essence of the message. So Krishna responded. He immediately came, in the letter she even told him at what point he should come and kidnap her. When they were going to, I think it was like a local demigod temple, and at that period you should come and take me away. So Krishna, he basically fulfilled her desire. That just at that point he just came in with his chariot. All the other kings were all, vying with each other to take Rukmini as their wife. But Krishna just came through with his horse and chariot, picked her up, put her on a chariot, and off he went like that. So anyway, the point was that Rukmini developed that love of Krishna simply by hearing about her. And basically we're doing the same thing. I mean, we've got the deity of Krishna's and these expansions, but we haven't personally seen Krishna, at least in this lifetime. Presumably nobody's seen Krishna yet. I know I haven't, but we're hearing about him and we're hearing his name. So it's basically the same thing. We're developing love for Krishna simply by the via medium of hearing about him. So there's some reference to the Mahatattva. It's a little bit technical, but basically simply presenting Mahatattva as basically the material realm made up of all the different universes. So at some point, due to the desire of the individual jivas to enjoy the material world, Krishna, through the via medium of his different expansions, he creates the Mahatattva, which is basically about 1/4 of the total cosmic manifestation, which is the material realm, and the jivas are impregnated through his glance into there. And we sort of heard a little bit that because the jiva wants to enjoy, so Krishna, he makes that arrangement. He knows that the jiva's not going to be happy. How do I put it somewhere? That Krishna, he provides the 5 ingredients from false ego so that the conditioned jiva can try to enjoy. Krishna knows the jiva will be frustrated, but because of that is the will of the jiva, he doesn't interfere. He doesn't interfere with the free will of the jiva. So, it's like a father, that the child is playing and the father can see that he's going to hurt himself. And he keeps saying, will you stop that? Will you put that down? Or whatever, they're balancing on a chair or something. You're going to fall over and hurt yourself, but the child doesn't hear. So the father says, okay, do what you want. And then the kid falls over and hurts himself. But I try to warn you, like that. So Krishna is like that he knows the jiva won't be happy, but he doesn't interfere with his free will. It's something that we have to learn. We have to learn the lesson ourselves. So, and the Prabhupada uses this word phantasmagoria. His Guru Maharaj Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would use that word quite often, phantasmagoria, and sometimes we hear these words, and because we see them so often, we just, at least for myself, phantasmagoria, but what that actually means. So I did Google it, and the word originated in 1802. It was the name of a London exhibition where there was optical illusions produced by different burning lanterns. So the whole exhibition was called phantasmagoria. So the dictionary definition is a sequence of real or imaginary images like those seen in a dream. So basically the living entity are seeing so many facilities to try and enjoy their senses. But basically because it's temporary and because they're not fully satisfied, it's like almost like imaginary images like those seen in a dream. They're just flickering. And that's basically in this world. We're having flickering happiness and distress. We may have some distress for some time and we're thinking that as soon as I get over this I'll enjoy, and the enjoyment comes and then it disappears again. So this is the phantasmagoria that we hear about. It is just flickering happiness and distress. But nevertheless, and the only way the jiva can actually enjoy in this world is because Krishna is making the arrangement for them to do it. And through this false ego, it's said that this means that the false ego in the sum total form of Mahatattva is generated from the marginal potency of the Lord. So the marginal potency, that's us, that's the jivas, the spirit souls. So we have that quality of false ego, and from the false ego the different elements are manifested so that we can try and enjoy. So those elements are basically the sense objects, of objects and hearing and smell and taste and touching. So those five senses we're using to try to enjoy in this material world. And of course above that is the mind. We're trying to mentally, we may be enjoying different things, intellectual conversations like that, and then above that is the intelligence through our intellect, where we're getting some sort of sense gratification, maybe studying for a PhD and a person finds it's very intellectually stimulating, or a problem is presented to them at work, and with their intelligence they try to solve it, so they get some satisfaction like that. It's all material, but nevertheless they're developing some sort of satisfaction like that. And then of course the false ego. So the false ego is thinking that we are the centre of the universe. To one degree or another we're thinking like everything is revolving around me. That's the sense of false ego, that we want to be served rather than to serve. But as devotees, as that we become slowly purified, then that true pure ego starts to manifest, and then the desire from wanting to be served changes to wanting to serve. That any opportunity to render some service, we become enthusiastic to do that. But the conditioned state, it's the opposite. That we want everybody running around us to one degree or another. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's very blatant. I worked in a hospital years ago in Perth, and there was one room, there were 6 patients there, and I think that for some reason there was only one nurse for the 6 patients. I'm not sure why that was. Normally it's more, but there was one patient who was getting upset that this nurse was looking after the others, and at one stage says, "You should be looking after me. Don't worry about them. What about me?" It was just very, very blatant like that. So that's the a full-blown sort of false ego aspect, that I'm the only important person here. So we all have that to some degree or another. But at least as devotees, we at least theoretically understand what's going on there, and we're trying to purify ourselves and train ourselves to understand that we're actually not the centre of the universe, but our actual constitutional position is Jiva Sruva Krishna Nityadastada, eternal constitutional position as Krishna Das, eternal servant of Krishna. So, we've got that, what was that Bob Dylan song, that you got to serve somebody. Apparently he did travel with devotees in late 60s, early 70s, I heard. Or he spent some time with the devotees, and that's where he picked that. That's the inspiration of that song. He got the understanding that it doesn't matter who you are, ultimately you have to serve somebody, whether you like it or not. So, of course, most people, because of their false ego in this world, they don't want to serve anybody. And if they do, they want to get paid for it. They want to get something back, mode of passion. I do something for you, but I'll get something back. Whereas the proper, pure mentality of the jiva is that let me serve you, but I don't want anything in return. I just want to serve you and develop love for you. So that's the perfection of that understanding that that the jiva is the eternal servant of Krishna. Few points. You could speak a long time, but we're nearly running out of time. If there's any questions or comments, I'll just read the verse again from the darkness of false ego. The first of the 5 elements, namely the sky, is generated. Its subtle form is the quality of sound, exactly as the seer is in relationship with the seen. So any questions or comments at all? Yes, sir.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Sometimes it says that the material creation is a cloud in the spiritual sky. And in other places, maybe in the same place, it says that it's 1/4 of the total creation of the creation. So it sounds contradiction.
Well, basically, from Krishna's point of view, everything is the spiritual realm. It's all his energies. It's more us discriminating than Krishna discriminating. But to facilitate the desires of the jivas who want to enjoy separately, he arranges 1/4 to be covered like a cloud. So that then becomes, that's the Mahatattva, that's the material realm. So the two different examples you gave, more or less, they don't contradict each other. It's just a different way of understanding, basically. That you've got the whole sky, and at some point a cloud comes along. So the sky's still there, or you could say the sun. It covers the sun. The sun's still there, but it's just covered from our vision by the cloud.
I'm thinking about the quantity. 1/4.
Yeah.
Is quite big, and when you say it's a small cloud in the sky, it sounds very small.
Well,
so that's what I'm speaking about.
Yeah, okay. So 3/4, 1/4, 3/4. The 3/4 is still a lot compared to 1/4. So.
I'm saying that how come the material creation, which is just a small cloud in the sky, is 1/4 of the creation? That's my question.
Yeah. Anyway, sometimes it's described like that, a small cloud. Yeah. So, but 1/4 to 3/4 is not that big, you could imagine that, that the total cosmic manifestation is huge, and even if you take 1/4 of that, 25%, that's still a lot. But I guess from one point of view, you could say that's the material world is insignificant. From a devotee's point of view or from Krishna's point of view, it's not that significant. It's just a small cloud like that. So I guess it's just terminology that's been used. So, but anyway, regardless, it's understood to be to no more than 1/4. Sometimes Prabhupada says no more than 1/4. So maybe it's less than 1/4. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Yes, sir.
Thank you for the class. topic sound vibration. Our whole existence is about sound vibration. Holy name, or inside, like mind speaks. Like Gopal mentioned here, one can really enjoy the association of Lord of pure vibration. So, like how this aspect of purity works in creating vibration.
So how does
aspect of purity works in creating vibration? Like, for example, like we chant every day, Hare Krishna.
yeah.
And some of we try to be in goodness, but when you go out and we see, for example, like Nike sign, just do it. So that one thing makes us more passionate, but same time we're chanting every day. So how this aspect of purity works in creating vibration?
I'm just trying to understand your question. I mean, when we're chanting that the name's pure, but we also get influenced by the modes as well. So, I mean, slowly as we become more and more purified, we become less influenced by the modes. But that doesn't mean that the name's ever going to be impure, you know. I mean, like we may be hearing from the spiritual master and his instructions are absolute and perfect. And along with that instruction comes the potency to fulfill those instructions. But if we're a little bit spaced out and we're not hearing properly, we may be fulfilling the instruction but not in the way that the spiritual master wanted. So therefore, you know, it could be a bit of mode of passion. We race in and do this and do that and we make a whole mess of it. But we're thinking we're following the instructions of the spiritual master. So in the same way, I mean, you can also be chanting in the mode of ignorance. You know, you're sleeping, you're nodding off, and or somebody gives you a bit of a shake and you yell at them, you know. I'm not sleeping, you know. But it's not that the holy name is in ignorance. We're covered by that ignorance in the same way that, you know, have what's called a machine gun japper. You know, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna, you know. That's mode of passion. But it's not that the holy name's in passion, but we're influenced by that. But nevertheless, the holy name will, you know, purify us. But in the beginning, it takes a little bit of time. That's all. So I don't know, is that what you're referring to? Or? Yeah. So, I mean, until we become liberated souls, we're always going to be influenced by the modes. And even in the mode of goodness, that in itself is conditioned. We may be feeling very peaceful and relaxed and developing knowledge, but that is a conditioning also. We need to come free of that. But that's the springboard to go to the spiritual platform. So at least, you know, if you become free of passion and ignorance, that's a good start. But nevertheless, while we're in this material world, like Gita says, in every action in this world is covered by fault, like a fire is covered by smoke. Doesn't matter what we do, there's going to be some fault. But Krishna, he doesn't see the faults. He sees our sincerity. You know, it's one class is quite interesting that when we act in a way where the I'm trying to get this right, where the motive is bad but the action is good. Krishna doesn't see the motive, he sees the action. So an example was given like Putana. So Putana's motive was to kill Krishna, but she approaches a mother to give her breast milk to Krishna. So the motive was bad, but the action was good. So therefore Krishna, he only saw the action, and in that way Putana was promoted to the spiritual world as his nurse in the spiritual world. So Krishna just sees the good. He doesn't, you know, we might have so many different polluted motives in our mind, but if there's an essence of you know, sincerity to please Krishna, that's what Krishna sees. So whilst in the material world, you know, there's going to be a lot of faults, you know, and our conditioning is going to get in the way, but Krishna, he overlooks that. He just sees, you know, the sincerity. This jiva, despite his faults, he's trying to serve me, and that way we get his blessings. Okay, good question, thank you. All right, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.